50,000 years ago, a group of people stood at the edge of a continent, looked out at open water, and kept going. No compass, no map, no guarantee of land on the other side, and somehow they made it. The oldest confirmed sea crossing in human history happened around 65,000 years ago. That's when the ancestors of Aboriginal Australians reached the continent of Australia, a landmass that has never, at any point in geological history, been connected to mainland Asia by a land bridge. The water gap was never less than 70 kilometers wide. There was no walking across. They had to build something and push off. Here's the strange part. We've never found the boats. Wood rots, reed bundles dissolve, bark canoes leave almost no trace in the archaeological record. What we do have is the people themselves. Their presence in Australia proves the boats existed, even if the boats are gone. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The crossing happened. We just can't hold the vessel in our hands. So, what did they probably use? The most ancient watercraft reconstructed by archaeologists are simple in design but surprisingly effective. A bamboo raft, logs tied together with plant fiber, can carry several people and their tools across open water. Dugout canoes carved from a single tree trunk with a sharpened stone were found in parts of Europe dating back nearly 10,000 years, and similar techniques almost certainly existed long before that. Bark canoes, essentially sheets of tree bark folded and sealed at the ends, were still being used in coastal Australia when European explorers arrived. These weren't primitive experiments, they were refined, tested, inherited technologies passed from generation to generation over tens of thousands of years. The key insight most people miss: these early humans weren't improvising, they were observing. They watched floating logs drift with currents. They noticed that some wood stays buoyant for days. They experimented on rivers first, then coastal waters, and eventually open sea. The ocean crossing wasn't a single bold leap. It was the end result of accumulated knowledge, built up over thousands of years of watching the water. And the water, it turns out, was trying to help them. Navigation without instruments sounds impossible until you understand what the ocean is actually made of. It isn't a featureless flat surface, it's a system. And systems have patterns. The people of the Pacific, thousands of years before any European sailor crossed that ocean, had mapped it entirely in their heads. Polynesian navigators memorized the rising and setting points of over 150 stars. They knew that at a given latitude, a specific star rises at a specific point on the horizon, not approximately, but precisely. If you keep that star at a fixed angle to your canoe, you hold your course. When that star sets, you switch to the next one in the sequence, but stars are only half the story. The Pacific Ocean has swells, long rolling waves generated by distant weather systems thousands of kilometers away. These swells travel in consistent directions for weeks at a time. A navigator lying flat on the hull of a canoe could feel the swell direction through his body even when he couldn't see the stars through cloud cover. This is called wayfinding by swell. It isn't superstition, it's physics, absorbed into the human body through years of practice. There were other signals too. Certain species of birds, the golden plover, the frigate bird, fly specific routes between islands. Their direction tells you where land is. When you see phosphorescent plankton lighting up the water at night in a particular pattern, it can indicate an underwater reef, which means an island nearby. The color of the water changes as you approach shallow land. Clouds tend to form over islands and hold their position even when wind clouds are moving. A navigator who had spent his life on the ocean could read all of these simultaneously, cross-referencing them against each other the way a modern pilot reads instruments. The famous Marshall Islands stick charts, lattices of curved sticks bound together, weren't maps you consulted at sea. They were teaching tools, used on shore to help students memorize the relationship between currents and island positions. The knowledge lived inside the navigator's body, not on any object. You couldn't steal the navigation system by capturing the chart. Here's the question that often goes unasked. Why did they go? The open ocean is not inviting. It offers no food that is easy to catch, no shelter, no fresh water, no landmarks. Every hour spent at sea is an hour of pure vulnerability. So what compelled people to keep pushing outward, century after century, across progressively more dangerous water? Some crossings were almost certainly accidents. A fishing group gets caught in an unexpected current. A storm pushes a canoe far offshore. If they survived and made landfall somewhere new, that knowledge came back with them, and the route became repeatable. Accident becomes exploration, becomes tradition, but accidents don't fully explain the systematic colonization of the Pacific Islands, which happened in an outward arc from Southeast Asia over roughly 3,000 years, reaching Hawaii by around 300 CE and New Zealand by 1300 CE. That kind of sustained directional movement requires intention. People were going because they knew or strongly believed that land existed ahead of them. One reason was ecological pressure. Hunter-gatherer groups and early farming communities exist in balance with their local resources. When that balance tips, drought, soil exhaustion, overpopulation relative to food supply, moving outward becomes survival strategy, not adventure. The ocean wasn't an obstacle, it was the road. Another reason is social. Polynesian oral histories record that specific voyages were launched to find new land for younger sons who would not inherit, for communities that had lost conflicts, for individuals seeking prestige through discovery. Status was attached to the person who found the new island. The navigator who returned with the route to a new island became a different kind of person in their society. Irreplaceable, honored. The ocean crossing wasn't a metaphor for courage. It was a rational response to real circumstances, carried out by people who had spent their entire lives building the tools and skills to make it survivable. And when they arrived, wherever they arrived, they brought their plants, their animals, their fire, their knowledge. The island was not just discovered, it was planted. By the time European explorers arrived in the Pacific in the 1500s, they encountered people living on islands separated by thousands of kilometers of open ocean and assumed these people had been isolated, cut off, primitive. The idea that they had navigated there intentionally, with precision, was not taken seriously for centuries. It took until the 1970s for a systematic effort to recover this knowledge. The Polynesian Voyaging Society rebuilt a traditional double-hulled canoe called hokulea using ancient design principles, and in 1976 sailed it from Hawaii to Tahiti, roughly 4,000 kilometers, guided entirely by traditional navigation. No GPS, no compass, no charts. The navigator Mau Piailug, a master wayfinder from the island of Satoral, held the entire route in his memory. The voyage took 34 days and arrived within kilometers of the intended destination. That trip didn't just prove a theory, it recovered a tradition that had nearly died. Mau Piailug taught what he knew to a new generation of Hawaiian navigators. Hokulea went on to complete a voyage around the entire world, arriving back in Hawaii in 2017, guided by traditional wayfinding the entire way. There is something specific about this story that deserves to sit with you. For most of the time that modern humans have existed, roughly 300,000 years, we have been in motion. We crossed continents on foot, we crossed straits on rafts, we crossed oceans on vessels that left no trace. The idea that ancient people were static, rooted, waiting for someone to come to them. That idea is wrong. Movement was the default. The ocean was not the edge of the world. For the people who built the first boats and read the first swells, it was the beginning of it. If this made you think about something you'd never considered before, subscribe. There's a lot more history that doesn't get told the way it actually happened. Drop a comment with where you'd have gone if you were the one pushing off from shore.